9. May 1945, Munich, Bavaria. In a notebook with a shop ledger's brown cover, a 34-year-old clerk named Karl Meissner writes a sentence he would not dare to speak aloud. "We knew enough to be afraid to know more, and now our peace will be measured by how completely we pretend otherwise." He stops. He dots the I in Friedlich. He closes the book and sleeps on the floor. Walls are blown open to the sky. Heat pipes twist like nerves. In the barracks of the Prinzregentennstrasse police station, a U.S. civil affairs officer is compiling an occupation report. Fuel stocks minimal, municipal water pressure unreliable, curfew to be enforced at 2100, outgoing mail suspended pending censorship, food stocks, bread for 3 days, potatoes for 2, no fat. The arithmetic of survival is simple. It begins with a day and ends with a day. How many calories? How many kilometers to walk for bartered eggs? How many bricks lifted by hand? How many minutes a curfew allows between the rubble and a basement shelter that now smells of wet ashes, soap and fear? Karl writes short, careful lines to make sense of the hours. Mother is missing since 12 January. The bunker collapsed at Müllerstraße. We have cleared the beams. The lines are a ledger, debits and credits of safety. Munich is a city of holes. Stacks of broken masonry wait like teeth on the curb. Women tie kerchiefs over their hair and sling bricks into baskets. They hand them down assembly lines, rebuilding their own annihilation with a method that will be called the work of the Trümmerfrauen. They are mentioned in a U.S. occupation summary as volunteer rubble collectors, a phrase that tries to make system from desperation. In June, a French newsreel camera catches a train of plundered machines being returned from Bavaria to France. An American Signal Corps photographer films Germans filing past the Dachau crematoria, eyes turned aside, hats in hands. The voice on the film's soundtrack says, "They did not know. They could not know." A British brigadier in an intelligence summary puts it differently. They knew something. If they did not know the specifics, they knew the smell. In German kitchens, people say, "Wir konnten nichts tun." We could do nothing. That is what they say when asked, and sometimes even when not asked, because they know they may soon be asked. Because they know they may soon be asked. Karl thinks, but does not write. I looked away. Not only from the trains, but from what looking means. The U.S. Army enters Munich on 30 April 1945. Within a week, there are checkpoints, posted rules in English and German, a ban on gatherings, a prohibition on Nazi insignia that everyone has already buried in the garden or burned in the stove. Officers requisition apartments, a chalk mark on a door, a folded tight slip stuck into the jamb. You are told a captain will take the front room with a view of the ruins of the opera house. You will make yourself scarce after dinner. 8 May is the capitulation. 10 May is another day of hauling bricks. The mathematics of food is a table of figures that cannot lie. In an Allied report, intake for an adult, Normalverbraucher, a normal consumer, is calculated at 1,095 calories per day in early winter 1945. Heavy workers get more, children less. Butter is a rumor. Fat is scraped from pans with fingernails. The city motor pool keeps gasoline for the jeeps, not the bread deliveries, so bakery lines form in the dark before daybreak and snake around corners. Cigarettes become numbers too, precise and transactional. 1 American Lucky Strike for 2 potatoes, 3 Chesterfields for a pair of nylons. A carton can buy a winter coat or a confession. Karl remembers the first time he reaches into a pocket for cigarettes he does not intend to smoke and feels richer than money ever made him feel. He trades for coffee substitute, a handful of sugar, a spoonful of lard. Later, he will read in an Allied economic analysis that price signals are distorted by political collapse and physical scarcity, and he will think of his mother's hands rubbing that lard into flour and salt to make biscuits that taste like relief. He walks to the countryside with 3 neighbors in October. Hamsterfarten. The hamster runs at night with his cheeks stuffed full of grain. His feet are blistered. He wears his father's old officer's greatcoat and hates it because he knows it helps him get butter at a farm where the woman looks at the coat and decides to be kind. This is another arithmetic. 2 kilograms of flour for an old coat, 6 eggs for a coffee grinder, a sack of potatoes for a sewing machine hauled in a handcart, the machine that used to sit in a city room now half gone. In Allied memoranda, Munich is ruined but governable. Governing means counting. The number of inhabitants is calculated and recalculated as refugees push in, prisoners straggle back, survivors emerge. Every day brings addends and subtrahends. A train with 100 displaced persons arrives. Another with 300 Germans expelled from the east is expected, delayed by a bombed bridge, then arrives, 70 are offloaded in the night, and led to the school gymnasium where there are camp beds and a bucket for washing. The first time Karl sees a displaced persons camp, it is because an MP directs him away from the main road. Judenlager, someone whispers, not angrily, not softly, just naming. Feldafing, south of Munich. There, beyond the fence, men in coats that hang off their shoulders stand in the sun like birds on a wire. He reads the hand-lettered sign, and it is in Yiddish and English and Polish. It says, "We are alive." He reads it as if it is a private letter addressed to him. He is ashamed and also angry at being ashamed, and angry that he must watch his anger. A US Jewish chaplain writes that German townspeople are required to view newsreels of the camps, and describes an old woman clutching her purse in the dark. In the same row, Karl sits stiff as a bench. He watches the piles of bodies, the doctors' gloved hands, the faces with their unimaginable expressions. He hears the room exhale when the lights come up. He hears someone say, "Das ist Propaganda," he writes. Later, "The worst thing about the newsreel was that I understood why someone would say that." He writes that line and then tears out the page because he understands that too. In August 1945, a notice arrives. Fragebogen. The questionnaire is thick, thin paper, pale lines. It asks 131 questions. Party membership, ranks, positions, dates, Dachedachena. He remembers standing at the gasworks in 1937, told quietly that party membership will smooth the path to promotion. Told not with threats, but with the soft persuasion of a system that has already learned to speak his desires. He joined then. He paid dues on time. He wore the badge twice, then put it in a drawer. He gave to the Winterhilfswerk with coins he could spare, which then seemed like a favor both to the poor and to the image he wanted to keep of himself. On the form, the boxes are wide and his handwriting is neat. Parteimitglied Seit, 1, November 1937. He leaves the line about Blockleiter empty. He was asked once to help collect for the party in his street, and he did not. But he did attend the rallies at the Odeonsplatz in 38 because his friends went. He writes, attended occasionally. He does not write that he felt both thrilled and numb. In the Office of Military Government for Bavaria, forms like this are stacked in pigeonholes. The denazification files are a mountain arranged into smaller mountains. Laws are passed. On 5 March 1946, the Law for Liberation from National Socialism and Militarism formalizes it. 5 categories: major offenders, offenders, lesser offenders, followers, Mitläufer, exonerated. The Sprüchkammer, the tribunal, will decide. Witnesses are called. Affidavits are sought. The Persilschein, named after laundry detergent, white papers to wash grey consciences. The occupation forces need stability, and stability requires staff in offices, engineers in power plants, teachers in classrooms. This is the mathematics of guilt, a system of equations where variables are not just deeds, but usefulness, paper evidence, connections, and the velocity of events rolling into the Cold War. In Bayern, the records show that of millions of questionnaires collected, the great majority end in category 4 or V. Major offenders are few, less than 1%. It is the arithmetic of institutional survival. A municipal chart shows what is needed: 27 clerks for public housing, 11 engineers for water, 8 accountants for finance, 13 policemen for street patrol. In the files, an accountant once in the SA is a lesser offender and receives a fine and is permitted to return to work after 6 months. A teacher who taught race science and later wrote a contrite letter is a follower and returns to class, though her syllabus now begins with Goethe. The mathematician who once calculated bomb trajectories now computes energy flows in a power plant. The dead do not object to any of this. The living need to feed their children. It is a calculus that balances on a knife blade. On 12 November 1946, sawdust drifts on the floor of the courtroom in Nuremberg as Goering is sentenced. Far away, in a smoky room in Munich, Karl's Spruchkammer hearing takes 12 minutes. He presents letters from a neighbor, Frau Huber, whose husband was Jewish and had been deported in 1941. She writes that Karl fixed her broken window and did not say harsh words in our hearing. She writes that he was quiet, nicht aggressive. Another letter comes from a foreman at the gasworks, reliable. His category is IV Mitläufer. He is fined a sum he cannot pay and allowed to work. He is fined a sum he cannot pay and allowed to work, but in a lesser capacity. He walks home thinking of the courtroom in Nuremberg and wonders what justice looks like if it cannot tell the difference between him and the man who chose to go to the rallies and shout a little louder than the rest. He does not believe in his own innocence. He does not yet know what to do with that disbelief. The wreckage draws the displaced like a forest fire draws birds. Every station platform receives trains that do not belong to here. From the east, the columns come, Silesian mothers carrying bundles, East Prussian grandfathers in boots with newspaper stuffed into holes, Sudeten German children who mistake the city's sirens for the farm's milking horns. They are told they are Germans, and that this is Germany. They are told also that Germany is full. The arithmetic of rooms is brutal. In September 1946, the Municipal Housing Office draws lines on a map and lists of addresses on cheap paper. Wohnraumbewirtschaftung, the management of living space. Apartment A has 62 square meters of floor space. Under new regulations, 8 square meters per adult, 4 per child. 3 original occupants remain, 2 more are assigned. 1 family of expellees squeezes into the kitchen and small back room. The corridor becomes a place to hang curtains for privacy. Doors stay open because there are fewer hinges than people. At night, snores cross borders. Karl is assigned a double duty he does not want. He becomes a clerk in that office in early 1947 because the gasworks has no budget for his wages. The Municipal Housing Bureau can pay him in ration coupons for extra bread. He reads the stories pressed into forms. Widow, 1 child, husband missing since Stalingrad. Returned from Pomerania, house burned, father shot by partisans. Released from Siberia, no shoes. From Theresienstadt, now in DP camp, decide repatriation, seeks news of sister. His hands touch every kind of paper except the ones that could make space. His work is to stamp. He writes in his brown-covered notebook, "When we divide the apartment, it is like slicing a loaf that is too small. You choose where the knife falls. You choose who gets the heel." He writes that and then writes, "Perhaps it is the crust that keeps us alive." Expellees are angry, or numb, or determined, or all three. They join associations that call themselves Landsmannschaften, men of the land now lost. They march in orderly rows carrying banners of Silesia, Sudetenland, East Prussia. It is a processional of places that still exist, but not for them. They join a political party, the bloc of expellees and deprived of rights. In a few years it will tilt coalition governments. Their life is a ledger too, a Lastenausgleich, equalization of burdens, a law in 1952 that promises compensation for lost property and, in the accounting of state power, also buys patience. In the winter of 1946-47, the cold is a character in every file. It enters without permission. It steals the difference between this and that. It is called the Hunger Winter, and it deserves the definite article. The British and Americans measure it as they measure everything. The river Isar freezes, coal stocks are down, factories idle, calories fall to 700 a day for some. Wood is taken from parks, then from abandoned houses, then from occupied ones in the night. A neighbor sees another neighbor dragging a door into a courtyard. The next day there is a blanket where a door used to be. These things are like crimes, but they are not crimes. The crossed wires make everything hot. Carl loses 10 kilos. He writes of the taste of thawing cabbage and the way the city returns to life in April as if the cold had been a separate occupation force. American reports show that tuberculosis rises and the noose of malnutrition tightens around the old and the young. A little boy in the apartment opposite dies of pneumonia because the family could not get antibiotics. Carl hears the mother's keening and lies on his mattress and tries not to listen. He writes, "The arithmetic of survival is also the arithmetic of who you do not have to listen to." In the spring of 1947, the city begins to look like a place again rather than a wound. The rubble is sorted. Bricks are cleaned with hammers by women whose palms have a pattern of blood and dust that no soap can remove. The municipal works move the cleared bricks to a field, and the field becomes a shifting red plain. A British officer writes in an Allied intelligence summary, "It is our impression that the Germans take comfort in organized activity, even if it is merely the ordering of ruins." He means it as both a compliment and a warning. That summer brings new arithmetic. The B-zone, the economic union of American and British zones, begins to pool resources. The Marshall Plan is announced. It arrives not as a concept, but as sacks of flour, barrels of oil, crates of powdered milk stamped with stars. A boy licks the dust of milk from his finger and calls it Schnee, snow. The US information posters explain that this is European recovery. The German phrase is more musical, Wiederaufbau. It is the same two roots as rebuilding a house and rebuilding a life. The Occupation Administration calculates imports, exports, caloric yields, coal production, all as if numbers can force a country to change. Some days numbers can. Carl is sent to a re-education lecture on 12 November 1947. The topic, constitutionalism. He notes the date and the irony that falls on the anniversary of the beer hall putsch. The American major who lectures them is precise, well-meaning, tired. He says that citizens have rights and responsibilities. He says that in a democracy, the government is answerable to the rule of law, not to the mass. He says this and, in the questions, a man asks how they will stop the Russians. The major answers as if the Russians are a problem that fits into the lecture. The Cold War has already been admitted through a side door, like a cousin with a grudge who will never leave. It changes the way every paragraph is read. In the files of the Bundesarchiv, there will later be memoranda, where the mathematics of guilt intersects with the arithmetic of the Cold War. To run a police force, you need officers. To keep a school open, you need teachers. To plan a city, you need engineers who know how gas goes from storage to stove. The law that lets former civil servants join again, later called the 131 Law by its number, signed in 1951, will unbar doors for many who had been asked to stay outside because their pasts were too heavy, then invited back because their skills are too necessary. In minutes of a cabinet meeting, a minister says, "We must make use of those who can serve. We cannot be more virtuous than is practical." It is not noble. It is not wholly ignoble. It is a system. The currency reform comes on 20 June 1948. It is beautiful and terrifying like a thunderstorm at night. The Deutsche Mark arrives in brown and green and grey notes that smell of ink. The Reichsmark turns to paper, then to memory. Each person gets 40 DM, then 20 more. The black market dies like a candle in wind. Shop windows fill with things that had been hoarded in back rooms, shoes, cloth, sausages. Prices are posted. Carl buys razor blades and a bar of soap and feels the future in his pocket, small but clean. The same day, in the East, the Soviet zone announces its own currency. The city becomes a lesson in arithmetic made geographic. Numbers loosen and tighten borders. The Berlin blockade begins a week later. Airfields hum. The countryside hears the planes and knows that the war's ability to sort the world into siege and relief has not ended. In November, a Lufthansa mechanic's notebook records each plane's payload: sugar, flour, coal. He writes, Rosinenbomber, raisin bombers, and overlayers of suffering. Germans stick a joke because it makes the logic bearable. In Munich, the DP camp at Funkaserne still operates. Between 1945 and 1949, hundreds of thousands move through the camps across the American zone. Some leave for Palestine, some for America, some remain stateless for years, the arc of their names still bent by a sovereign power that had been obsessed with names. Allies of a different war, forced laborers and prisoners from the East, Poles and Ukrainians and Russians, wait in lines for a future that seems to have lost its way. Sometimes they walk in the city. Sometimes Germans recognize faces that look like the people they remember from their street before the vans came. A British intelligence officer notes tension between local Germans and DPs, with incidents of violence, disputes over market stalls, words spat like seeds. Karl is sitting on a tram in December 1948 when two men in coats cut their eyes toward him, and he knows they are trying to decide whether he is one of those Germans who will meet their gaze and hold it, or look away. He holds it for a second. He looks away. He writes that night, "The mathematics of cowardice. 1 second of looking divided by 30 seconds of looking away. The sum feels like a life." In his office, the files grow and shift. There is a case. A former SA man returns, wearing a tie and humility, asking for an apartment transfer because the baby cries and the neighbor is a night worker. He produces a letter from a priest attesting to his piety. There is another case. A returned prisoner of war who spent 4 years in Tambov, gaunt as a fence post, silent in the waiting room, a small figure next to him who might be his wife or his sister. Karl stamps their form for a double room and feels like a general, which is to say, like a man who has the power to disappoint. A city requires rituals. It requires calendar pages to turn with words on them. Volkstrauertag, the day of mourning, is reconstituted in the 1950s. Black ribbons on lapels. Wreaths at monuments. Speeches are given that talk about the victims of war, and in those words, a merging of categories that is both solace and evasion. The bombed, the expelled, the dead at the front, the murdered, the burnt. Names that could cancel each other or align. If everything is tragedy, nothing is responsibility. If everything is responsibility, nothing can live under the weight. The speeches are the product of this balance. Education is another ritual. In 1952, a textbook committee in the Bavarian Ministry of Culture drafts a chapter on 1933 to 45. The Nazi period was an aberration, it says. The German people suffered greatly from war. A memo attached notes that the younger generation must be taught loyalty to the new democracy and the lessons of the past without paralyzing their spirit. The lessons are sometimes paralyzed anyway. In the old way, they are taught by omission. Students read about bombings and hunger and expulsions. They do not read about the faces in the DP camps, except as parts of a sentence that begins with the passive voice. The grammar is itself a defense. The subject is always missing. Carl watches his nephew in a short jacket and neat hair carry a school reader. He sits with him at the table and turns pages. He keeps his fingers from pointing too hard at the blank spaces. On Friday nights, he walks past the synagogue on Reichenbachstraße. He had passed this way before the war, when the building was different and people different, and his ability to decide what he was witnessing was different. He hears singing sometimes, and it is like hearing a song that once played in another room while you were washing dishes and not paying attention. He stands for a minute and listens now. In 1953, an uprising in East Berlin writes itself on the Western air. 17 Juni, the posters say. Workers who demanded bread are told they are counter-revolutionaries. The arithmetic of bread has joined the arithmetic of ideology with no remainder. In Munich, a man speaks in a beer hall about courage and godlessness and freedom, and some of the words are from a new script and some are from the old. People clap in a way that suggests they know clapping can be a public gesture or a private one, depending on what one needs it to mean. In 1955, the Bundeswehr is born. Uniforms return. Some of the men who wear them bring photographs of themselves in other uniforms. They say that this time it is different. This time it is defensive. This time they will be citizens in uniform, not uniformed citizens. It is not untrue. It is not comforting. The US Embassy cables home that West Germany is anchoring itself firmly in the West. Anchors can hold ships upright. They can also keep them from moving. Work changes shape. Karl moves from the municipal housing office to a rebuilt factory on Landsberger Straße that makes radio parts. The Wirtschaftswunder is a weather front, a wind with the smell of diesel and coffee, and people breathe it like oxygen. There are advertisements in bright colors, happy women in kitchens, sleek cars on alpine roads. The factory floor is clean. Foremen call workers. Herr and Frau no longer do as if they are children. The canteen serves meat on Thursdays. A union rep visits the floor and speaks of wages and holidays and dignity, the word used as if it was something you can order by catalogue. In 1957, Karl becomes a supervisor of materials. His desk has a lamp that is not from before the war. He supervises lists. He inventories capacitors. He calculates that the shipment of copper wire that came from the United States has a loss rate of 1.6% between crate and spool, and he writes a memo to reduce it. This is the mathematics of rebuilding. He is good at it. He is good at other important mathematics too, calibrating his speech to the room, recognizing a hint of old membership in a new colleague, and deciding not to press, measuring his own complicity in the act of not pressing. A man joins the firm. He is older. He shakes hands with a grip that used to be taught in youth organizations. He says, "I was in administration." He does not say where. In time, it emerges that he worked in a ministry in Berlin in 41, 42. He gives no more details. Someone whispers Globke in the canteen as a joke about the Chancellor's office, not about this man, and everyone laughs because it is clever and also because laughter is the best way to show each other that they are comfortable with the fact that the past does not cancel the present. It is a dangerous comfort. It is also how the office runs. There are court cases in Frankfurt in the 1960s. There are court cases in Frankfurt in the 1960s. There are voices on radio programs that are new, that do not ask permission to speak, that bring grief into law. In 1963, the Auschwitz trials begin. Former SS men stand in a court in Frankfurt and answer questions they cannot really answer. The public listens. Students sit on the floor in lecture halls and read pamphlets. A middle-aged man stands in a kitchen and says, "We did not know." His daughter says, "You did not want to know." He slaps the table, but softly, because he has begun to understand that an older arithmetic no longer yields the answer he thought it did. Carl listens to the broadcast of the judge's voice. He remembers a day in 1938. He remembers watching a shop window broken by boys who were not much older than he had been then, and the owner crying. He remembers the way his shoe crunched on glass like frost. He remembers the feeling in his throat, like swallowing a lie. He remembers going home and saying nothing. He holds this memory like a match that can burn or light the room. He writes again in his brown notebook, now patched with tape. Memory is also a ration card. What you don't spend expires. What you hoard spoils. He writes lines that sound like someone else wrote them. Then he writes, "The mathematics of guilt changed in the 1960s. The unknowns became knowns, and the equations had to be solved again." He does not tell his nephew about the time he signed a paper in 41 and sent a quiet man from the gasworks to the Labour office because the man's papers had numbers on them that made the gasworks say, "Not Aryan." He did not write any denunciations. He did not write any denunciations. He did not save anyone either. He did what the office required and did not grumble, and the next week the desk was clean. He speaks of this only to the notebook. He writes, "My silence was the grammar of violence." He tears out the page. He does not tear it into small pieces. He folds it and saves it, because he has begun to understand that the confessions we cannot speak need a different kind of listener. His neighbor, Frau Huber, now old, dies in early 1965. On her wall is a photograph of a man in a hat and scarf. The man's name has not been spoken in the building in 20 years. The man's name is Jakob. His nephew comes, his hair curling at the neck, from Israel. He stands in the hallway with a suitcase and looks at the staircase in the way that people look at battlefields. He does not visit long. He goes to the registry office and to the cemetery. He leaves flowers. He reads the names on plaques. He meets nobody's eyes in the stairwell. Carl says in his own head, "I am sorry," and imagined it has the force of an oath. It does not. It is still not nothing. He is learning to count small things as if they are currency, not because he wants to feel rich, but because this is reality. One morning in 1967, he visits a class at an elementary school to talk about his job as part of a civic education curriculum. The children ask about radios and circuits. One boy asks whether the war was exciting. One girl asks whether everyone got enough to eat. He says that wars are confusing even for adults, that what looks like excitement is often fear. He says that after the war, sometimes there was not enough to eat. He does not say whose famine weighed more. He does not say that the arithmetic of suffering is not a competition a country should try to win. In a Bundesarchiv folder, there is a report about memorials. In southern cities, memorials tend to list the names of fallen soldiers. In others, plaques have been added for civilian bomb victims. Few note the names of deported Jews. This is an observation, not an indictment. It reads like the weather forecast someone has written to avoid writing about whether the rain is late. The economics of the new republic rationalize the past by absorbing it. In the 1950s and early 1960s, factories are built on old foundations. Management learns to speak of human capital. Workers buy washing machines on installment plans. Refugees buy houses on allotments at the edge of towns. Their children become interior designers, mid-level executives, pediatricians. The DP camp's empty. Those who stayed leave traces in city directories that older people do not read. In office buildings, files are moved into basements. In basements, mold does its work. Time does too, but differently. It is not a fairy tale. Not everyone is redeemed by work and consumption. Former Nazis hold office, and some are too powerful. They are called to account too late. Victims return to find nothing left. A few get compensation. Some get letters with amounts that insult the grammar of justice. In a ledger kept by a Jewish organization, there are figures that look like decimals marching backwards, pennies paid for childhoods, weeks priced at rates lower than a train ticket. In another file, an engineer who refused to join the party returns to work quietly and trains 15 apprentices who will make radios that play Barbra Streisand and protest songs. The arithmetic of redemption is messy. It has no proofs at the back of the book. We can map the battles fought in these years in different ways. We can chart the decline of tuberculosis. We can chart the rise of private automobiles, Beetles and Opals, shiny proof of the fact that movement is possible again, even if the roads are carrying us in loops around things we still don't want to face. We can chart voting patterns, the dominance of the Christian Democrats in the 1950s, the SPD's gradual rise. We can set beside them the numbers in denazification files, the small categories of those punished, the larger categories of Mitläufer, the larger still category of the silent. We can map the arithmetics that have made, if not sense, then at least a pattern. In his notebook, Carl returns often to the night of 8 March 1943, when a siren sent them to the basement, and he found his mother's hand in the dark, and held it, and thought, as the walls shook, that survival is a kind of answer to a question nobody asked. He writes, "Sometimes I think the war ended so we could have the experience of surviving it. This seems like a poor design. The occupation's censorship relaxes and then vanishes, and the words people once only wrote in diaries become the words they can say in kitchens. Ich habe Schuld, one woman tells another, and the other lets the words sit on the table, not taking them, not rejecting them. I have responsibility, a man says, and is told by a friend that it is not all his responsibility. The words are adjusted. The German language has many ways to speak of these weights. The grammar is still being assembled. On 12 January 1970, in Warsaw, Willy Brandt kneels in front of the monument to the ghetto uprising. He bows his head. The photograph travels across the world and back into Germany. Many say it was right. Some say it was too much or too little. In Munich, in a living room with lace curtains, a television flickers black and white, and Carl watches and feels the tear he did not let fall on 12 January 1945 cross a border and realize itself. It is a different arithmetic of tears. It adds up to something he has learned to call dignity. The city of Munich opens the Jewish Museum on St. Jakobsplatz. It is near his apartment. He looks in at the glass and shapes. He reads the plaques. He reads the names. He walks past the square. His feet are good at the distance between acknowledgement and refusal. He is old, and the distance is easier now. He stops more often. Retirement brings paper. Not the kind with stamps, not the kind that assigns you to a room, the kind that listens. He buys a new notebook with a blue cover. The brown one sits heavy in a drawer. He uses the blue one for what he now allows himself to speak, and for copies of what he had once torn up and saved. He dates entries. He uses places as anchors. He writes, 25 August 1972. Landsberger Strauss. Saw a man by the tram stop with a tattoo on his arm. He looked like someone who had not been asked how he sleeps at night. I wonder how that courtesies works. 3. October 1973. Feldafing. Walked past the old camp, or where it was, grass and new fences. I feel the close and the far in the same step. 20. June 1978. Anniversary of the currency reform. I still remember the smell of new notes. I remember realizing that new money did not buy us out of old debts. He fills the blue notebook with the arithmetic he can now stand to see. The mathematics of food is now an anecdote about a roast on a Sunday. The arithmetic of rooms is a memory about a chair in a corridor. The mathematics of guilt is a ledger with two columns that do not balance and perhaps cannot. He makes peace with this. Or perhaps peace makes him. He has learned to avoid the easy sum of victim and perpetrator. He has learned to understand that the number of those who killed is far smaller than the number of those who did not stop them. He has learned that the large number is in some ways more frightening. He writes also about the ways the new democracy rests on bargains that were both necessary and cowardly. The return of officials who served the old regime, the pensions paid to those whose hands were not clean, the refusal for a long time to say that the pillars were stained. He does not revel in these facts. He records them. He thinks of his years in the housing office, when he stamped forms for men who would never have been his friends. And he thinks of the way that stamping was part of the creation of a new state. He does not excuse himself. He does not call himself a hero. He puts down numbers next to not quantifiable nouns: dignity, remorse, patience. In 1983, he attends a Sitzungsgespräch, a conversation with witnesses at the city archive. The archivist unrolls maps. He holds up ration cards. He produces a denazification file with its thin pages and asks the audience to read the questions. A young man in a metal band's t-shirt touches the paper as if it is his own. A woman his daughter's age notes the categories: major offenders, offenders, lesser offenders, followers, exonerated, and shakes her head at the weight of the tax